Hello, Pam here. We are doing the crochet block of the month for August, and this is block number 26. No, 25. I apologize. Block number 25. Is that correct? Yes, 25.
That's what I have.
You have 25. Good. I printed it. I have it on both sides, and 26 is on the other side. So now I couldn't remember. This was a really fun block. It went really quick. It has two different stitches in it, but it comes out. Oh, I'm going to switch to the camera because it's just easier to see. Let me share my screen. Go. All right, you guys can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's got a, let me zoom in a little. It's got a cross stitch pattern that it starts with that makes these little kind of X's. And then it has a star stitch pattern as well. So the cross stitch pattern happens all in one row. The star stitch pattern takes 2 rows to complete it. So I'm going to show you both of those. The hardest part, I will say, of this block is that the star stitch happens in the very first row. So you're making the star stitches into your chain, and that's a little fiddly to get started. And then it's much easier to do. But I'm gonna show you how to do that. So this is the one for my baby blanket.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to start. I love this color. It shows off the stitches so well. This kind of multiple, the purple and blue. And then I'm going to do it in a new cotton that we have called coastal cotton. Let me turn down the brightness just a little. And I'm just going to do a shorter repeat so that we can get across the rows here. I do recommend on this one chaining on your larger hook on one size up. There we go. I found it because you're making these stitches into the very first, into the chain. I found it easier being on the larger hook. Okay. So the pattern has you, I believe, chaining 30. I think I've done, I don't know, 15 here. I just wanted it enough to be able to show you the stitches. Okay, so for the cross stitch to start, the cross stitch is made out of double crochet stitches, okay? Zoom in just a little. All right. And you are going to do a double crochet in the 5th chain from the hook. So let me count down 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do a double crochet right here. So I'm going to yarn over. You can choose to go underneath 1 loop or 2. It's up to you. I'm going to go underneath 1. Yarn over. Double crochet. Okay. So now what I have here is I have the first 3 chains count as a double crochet, and another chain counts as a skipped stitch. So I'm going to make a double crochet in the stitch right before the double crochet. So I've gone into that stitch right there. I am now going to make a double crochet in the chain right before it. So it's going to cross. So I'm going to do a yarn over, and this is where the fiddly part comes in. I'm going to find my, let me dim my watch here so it's there we go, dinging constantly. All right, so I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to hold that yarn over on the hook, and I'm locating my stitch first. I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to go from the front to the back, grab the yarn and come back, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Don't worry, I'm going to do this again. What you get is this little X. So this stitch crossed over and we made it into the chain before this stitch. Now the whole, and that's the whole, that's the cross stitch. So now we're going to skip the next chain, and this is the tricky part, locating where you actually have made a stitch. Let me pull that loop. Just a little here. All right. So the first stitch is attached. This is where I said it got a little funky because it's so fiddly in the first row. All right. So I'm attached already into this stitch right here.
Mhm.
I'm going to skip this one and I'm going to make a double in this one right here. And you don't need to worry about pulling these loops up very big. It makes it a nice kind of compact, but don't be too tight on this either. Now the stitch that we skipped, I'm going to make a double in there. Yarn over, go into the loop, grab the yarn and come back, yarn over. So now I have 2 cross stitches. And you do this all the way across the row.
Now, you seem to be taking it from the back, bringing the thread up from the back. Is that
So
the yarn up?
I'm going into the front of the stitch.
Right,
Let me skip this one. I'm going to go in here. So we made my
Right.
double. So I'm doing the same thing, grabbing the yarn and coming back to the front.
what you mean by that? Yeah,
Yarn
go ahead.
over. Just like you would a regular stitch. Hold on,
Right,
pull out some yarn here. And then to cross, yarn over. I'm going to go into the front of the stitch.
Mhm.
I'm pushing it to the back, grabbing the yarn and coming
Okay,
back
I
to the
see. It
front.
just, it just looked different to me.
Yeah.
The way it's coming through. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
You got it. And like I said, this is the hardest row because you're going into this chain. So I have another cross stitch there.
You always
it's-
skip one and then you start it again.
Correct. So you're going to skip another and just make sure that you are locating where you actually have a stitch attached. It looks like this stitch is open. It's not. I'm attached to that one. So I have to skip this one and go into
And you
this
go
one.
back to the saved one. Okay.
Right. All right. So go in here. And then go back to this one you skipped. And it's not a dramatic cross because they are right next to each other,
Mhm.
but you do get these little X's. They almost look like little crossed V's more than anything, but they are little X's there. All right. So I'm using a slightly bigger hook for this yarn just so that you can see it a little easier.
Oh, I see it now. Yeah, it's a little, when you pull it and draw it. it's a
Right,
little
exactly.
harder to
And when you
see.
look
Yeah.
at it here, the brightness needs to adjust. So here's a cross stitch right there. So you do get a little bit more of a, on the next row, it kind of pulls it up a little and you get these nice X's, okay? So that's one row and that's the cross stitch. So you're always skipping. Make sure you're skipping a stitch and then going back into the stitch previous. All right, the next row, and then you're going to do a single across those cross stitches. And I would say double check your stitch count on these first couple rows, just to make sure that you are, because once you get to the star stitch, and to make sure you didn't skip any chains and things like that. I found that on one of my passes, I missed a chain, so it didn't work out at the end.
Okay.
So do double check your counting as you go. All right, and remember your the make sure you go into the top of that chain because it counts as a double crochet. All right, so now we're ready to do a star stitch. And a star stitch takes 2 rows to complete. So on this first pass, we're going to make half of the star stitch, and then when we come back, we're going to complete the star stitch. The star stitch is I'm going to do it. I can't even explain it to you. So when you're at the beginning of the row, you have to do a beginning star stitch, and it's a little bit different than when you're doing it across the row. So we're going to start with a chain 3. Okay. Oh, I didn't do my last single here for that. Do not go into the chain. Chain 1, 2, and 3. Now, you know what, and this is on my notes as well. If you are a person who chains and then turns, when you're doing the star stitch, I found it easier to turn and then chain, and here's why. To do the beginning star stitch, you are going to go into the second chain from the hook. You're going to start with a, and you're not starting with a yarn over. Okay, you're going to go into the stitch and you're going to pull up a loop. Okay, you're going to go into the first chain that you made, yarn over, pull up a loop. I've got 3 loops. Now I'm going to go into the very first stitch on this row, yarn over, pull up a loop. I've got 4 loops. I'm not done yet. I'm going to go into the next 2 stitches. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now we're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. And you're
How many loops do we have?
I'm going to go get my notes here in a second. You're going to chain to finish it. And what that creates is a little eyelet. And I just left my paper.
Oh, I see what's doing. It's bending.
With 6 loops total when you pull through.
And so when we come back and slip, are we just going into the very first one? Did you say slip back in, slip stitch or something after you get them all on there?
You'll yarn over and pull through all of the loops. So that beginning, I'm going to do the beginning one more time and then show you how to do it.
Okay.
It's a little bit different since you're going into a chain.
Okay.
So there's a chain 1. Let's see, chain 1, 2, 3. And I would say on this stitch, be a little bit on the looser side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go into the first chain away from the hook. I'm sorry, the second chain away from the hook. Excuse me. I'm going to go in, grab the yarn, and pull up a loop. I've got 2 loops.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go into the next stitch, grab the yarn, pull it up. I have 3 loops. I'm going to go into the first stitch of the row.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. The first stitch of the row, yarn over, pull up a loop. I have 4 loops. And now I'm going to go into the next 2 stitches and pull up loops. So 1, there's 5 loops, 2, 6 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I made myself a little note here. 2 loops, 3 loops, 4 loops, 5, 6 loops. Okay. It made it a little easier for me to remember. And then yarn over and pull through all 6 loops.
I see the top of the star.
Yeah. So then to complete the stitch, you have to do a chain 1. And what that does is it creates a little eye right there. And as we do the next star stitch, since we don't have a chain anymore, we're going to start by going into the eye of the stitch. So we're just star stitching all the way across. Dive in to the eye, grab, pull up a loop. Now we're going to go into, still haven't quite figured out the best way to use this. There we go. All right, so we made all of these loops that made this side of the star. We're going to go underneath the last two loops that are created in that star and pull up a loop. And I mean that by going right underneath both of those loops, grabbing the yarn and pulling it up. And I've got 3 loops. I'm going to go into the very stitch itself that I'm already attached to and pull up a loop. And then I'm going to pull up loops in the next 2 stitches. 1, 2, and now I should have 6 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yarn over, pull through all 6 loops. Chain 1 to complete the stitch. And then it's a repeat. So the beginning of the row is the only one that's different. Everything else is the same. You go into the eye, draw up a loop. You go underneath the last 2 loops, pull up a loop. You go into the stitch itself that you're already in, pull up a loop. And I'm really pulling up a loop to the height. I'm not keeping it really tight. And that way, when you pull it through, it's nice and it's not dense. It's nice and soft. And then I'm going to go into the next 2 stitches and pull up a loop. 1, 2, 6 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through all 6 loops, chain 1 to finish. Okay. So as you're working across, you're going to do this all the way across. Just double check. And I just did a few stitches. You're going to do this all the way across, and you'll have 1 stitch left that you'll complete with a half double crochet. I don't have that, so I'm going to just complete mine all the way across here. Into the eye, underneath the last 2 loops, into the stitch itself, and into the next 2 stitches. 1, 2, yarn over, chain to finish. And I'm going to sneak a half double crochet in here, just to make the pattern work out. And that's how you finish that row. So now we have, and you'll see it pulls in a little. If it's pulling in a whole lot, you've made them too tight. If it's pulling in a little, it's okay. The next row is going to open it back up. So the next row, to complete the star stitch, starts with a chain 2. And now you're going to go into each of those eyes that you made, each eye of the star stitch, and make 2 half double crochets in each eye. So yarn over into the eye. There's 1. And there's 2. And that's what completes the star. I'm going to the next one and I'll show you. I can pull away from it a little. 1. No chain or anything in between. And it looks nicer from the other side. You can see those 2 half double crochets going into it complete the whole star shape of the stitch. I need to ease off the cough medicine, I think. All right. And 1, and 2, and 1, 2, and you'll half double crochet in the very last stitch because I'm out of eyes now. And I'll just do a half double in the last stitch. There you go. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see it a little easier. So here where the first half of the loop is here, first half of the star, and then the 2 half doubles across complete the star shape. So it's actually pretty easy, but a really nice effect. I think this would make a really pretty baby blanket. And that's
And the top row is actually row 4.
the top row is actually row 4. Yes. Yep. And then you go right back into doing the cross stitches, which are now, and you can see it's not curling in anymore. Adding those 2 half double crochets has really made it lay back out. I will say that I felt like on this block, my sides were a little wonky. And then once I put the border on, it was fine.
Okay.
A single crochet all around really evened everything up, just because you've got these kind of openings where the eye is and the different stitches. So it looked wonky, but it I'll show you the finished one again. It did finish out very nicely. So now we're going to go back into the cross stitch. So we're going to chain 3, 2, 3. And now I'm going, and it doesn't give you any direction. It just says do the star stitch. You just need to skip and go into the next one with a double crochet. So I am going to, I want to say it is in, we're just going to skip this one right here, and we're going to go in right there. And now it's much easier because you're not going into the chain. And now I can go into the skip stitch, yarn over. And I found if you make that yarn over and hold on to it, kind of dive in and grab it and pull it back, then my stitches stayed a lot more even. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Skip the next stitch and make a double. Over, make your double into the skip stitch. Skip the next stitch, make a double. So you're just cross stitching all the way across. There's no chains, there's no in between the stitches, which I found it very easy to just to move across. This block I think really went very quickly. So here's another example of make sure you are skipping the right stitch. So sometimes when this cross comes across, you can't see that you're already in that stitch. So just be careful that you're not skipping a stitch that already has a stitch in it. So here's the stitch I'm going to skip, and now I'm going to go into this one. And I believe it works out that you will end up doing just a single double crochet in the very last stitch. So you should end up with one extra just to do a double crochet. And that's your whole pattern. And then it's a repeat. So then you're going to
pretty though.
And then you're going to do a row of singles across. And then you're going to do your star stitch, which is 2 rows. And then you're going to go back to the cross stitch. And then you're going to do a row of singles across, and you repeat that 3 times. And I'm happy to show those stitches again here in just a second, but let me.
Looks soft too.
It does. Let me brighten that up just a tad.
Yeah.
So it, that wonkiness really does kind of go away. Just a row of just single crochet all the way around the edge took out all of the wonkiness, and it's a very squishy stitch. It's not stiff. The cross stitches I think add a little of flexibility. It's not a particularly dense stitch. You can definitely see through, but I think it's a very pretty pattern. I could see this being this would be a beautiful cowl too, to make it longer and then join it. This is. Sometimes I see the stitches and I'm like, oh, this is nice, and let's move on. This I can see in a lot of different things, just because there is a lot of drape to it. It's easy to do, and I think it has a really nice effect. This would be a beautiful border to do if you want to do a blanket and just double crochet. You could do the
too late. Yeah, 2 rows
the
of
star
that.
stitch at the beginning, and then so. I think a really lovely stitch to do. Do you want any of those stitches? You want me to show them again? Yeah, okay.
We're
I think
okay.
they're really much easier. The descriptions are so wordy. But
I was
once I
gonna
work
say, how
through
do you,
them,
all
once
that,
I work through them, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what they're saying. I have found that in these particular patterns, they use a lot more words than they need to. They could have made it a little bit more concise and made it a little bit easier, but a really nice pattern. And that's the block number 25.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's all I have for today. It was pretty quick. And like I said, I think I did this whole block in probably 25 minutes. I mean, it really went fast. It was just because you didn't have to, once you knew what row you were on, you just zoomed across. You didn't have to go back and look for your pattern. You didn't have to count anything. I think one time I ended up, I missed a chain on the stars. I missed a stitch on the star stitch. So I didn't end up with the right number. So I had to pull it back. So just be careful that you are going into the correct stitches and that you're skipping empty stitches and not going into stitches that already have a stitch in it. That would be my tip to you.
Very good.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Is anybody going on? I'm going to stop recording here. Hold on.